Hello and welcome to another episode of Modern Mom, where we talk about being mom in the 21st century. This is episode 2, and today I have Amelia M. Hello.
Hi, thank you, Remy. I was talking to you about a book called Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office by Louis P. Frankel. As we tend to, as mothers, have slower progress in our careers because of the distraction of having a family.
She was a psychotherapist, gone kind of career coach, and she kind of comes up with, like 120 plus potential mistakes that women make in the workplace. She talks about the mistake, and then she goes into some examples, and then at the end of each mistake kind of goes over some coaching tips on, how you can fix it, essentially. Really direct advice.
That's right, and I can definitely say I was guilty of quite a few of those on her list.
Me too, absolutely, yeah. One of the things that really stood out to me was she talks a lot about appearance, actually.
Right, in the modern workplace, we want to bring our authentic selves, but we might be sabotaging ourselves at the same time. There was just transitioning in Silicon Valley, the casual dress code.
Right.
But it got to the point where I literally had to be told by some of the management, like, just don't look like you're going to the beach.
Right. And she mentions that too in the book. If everyone else is dressed like Monday morning and you're dressed like Friday night, there is a gap.
I do have my nose pierced. It's just a little diamond stud.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing
beautiful.
Fancy, nothing dramatic. But, back in the 90s, I was asked by a recruiter if I'd be willing to take my nose ring out.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I said, if they're not comfortable with this piercing, then I'm probably not the right fit for that company.
I actually kind of like that because I think there is this balance between, yes, there are some expectations in the workplace from women, but also where do you draw the line in terms of, I don't want to give up my authentic self.
It's much more common now to be able to have piercings and tattoos and things like that. But it is something that can still hold you back from the corner office.
Agreed. Yeah, I think especially there are certain tattoos she even calls out specifically in the book that have connotations and meanings. And I think that is probably the biggest part of it, is that with women, there tends to be a lot of associations, negative associations, unfortunately. And, if we can be mindful of that. One thing that she said that actually really stood out to me was she mentioned the exception. A woman in the office who broke all the rules. Yeah. All of those rules that are spoken and unspoken in the workplace, she had basically broken all of them. She called out an example similar to that and said that woman is the exception. And it could be because they are just exceptional at their job. They've been there for a really long time. They have a ton of credibility, a ton of tenure. And that really stood out to me because...
Right. And, the modern workplace, we have so many generations working together, which we've never had before. And we have so much diversity in, immigration, people coming from all over the world working together. So while, some people might want to put purple in their hair, or pink, or have fun, and that's totally great and fine, but just know that it does come with that risk of being misinterpreted or, not being appreciated by everybody. It could be something that could hold you back. It's not fair, but it's something to acknowledge and consider.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of the points that she makes in the book are really worthy of consideration, but it was written quite a bit ago, wasn't it? 20 years or something?
Yes, I think this is a new edition.
Right.
It's kind of been updated. Yeah, there's all kinds of interesting stuff in there. I'm trying to think of a couple of the other examples.
Actually, I've got a few statistics here that were in the book that I want to bring up.
Right.
So let's see. Women account for 20.3% of elected members in Parliament. Women total 3.8% of Fortune 500 CEOs. Worldwide, 8% of top executives are female.
That's it.
Women make up 23.7% of U.S. legislators. And there are 20 women heads of state worldwide.
Yeah, that demonstrates very clearly the lack of female leaders.
Yeah. Oh, another thing that she said actually that really stood out to me, she mentioned this twice. She talked about, because we were talking about looks and, corporate and stuff.
Right.
So she said, 7% about it is what you're saying. 38% is how you sound. And 55% is how you look. So that notion of like looking a certain way, I mean, you know, women saying something and, you know, whether or not they're taken seriously, 55% of that is determined on how they're looking, how they're dressing, the piercings, the tattoos, like this all plays a factor.
Yeah, and that's something that she brings up too is as a woman, you can't, the answer isn't just to act like a man.
Right.
Or do things like the men are doing it. That those rules will not apply to us.
Right.
So we have to, you know, it might seem unfair, but we have the same, we have a little more pressure on our appearance.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that comes to mind is a TED Talk I saw. And she was specifically talking about harassment. I can't remember the name of the person. But she was wearing like an off-shoulder sexy dress.
In the TED Talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I thought, this is, you know, cognitive dissonance. How am I supposed to take her seriously?
Right, even you
talking
felt that
about
way.
Sexual harassment when she's dressed sexy and provocative,
right,
relative to a TED Talk.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, so there is this woman on social media, Julia Cha, and she talks about the concept of CPR, capitalism, patriarchy, and racism.
Yes.
And I really like her method because she's Asian, so she understands that really raw type of feedback, which I was used to receiving as a kid, but she delivers it in a gentle way. And it makes sense.
She did a fantastic job describing how we can't escape these three things. A lot of these things that we have to face in the workplace, especially as moms, especially as single moms, you can't do it without considering capitalism.
Yeah.
Considering the patriarchy,
right,
and considering racism. Like, these are just all factors that are going to influence our success in the workplace.
Yeah, I agree.
Something she brought up in that book that was interesting to me because I'm an executive assistant. So part of my responsibilities are ordering food and making these team building events happen. And she brings up that the person who's doing the food doesn't help you get the corner office.
Yeah, she does say to recommend to rotate those responsibilities. That, hey, there's definitely been some growth and change, and I think people are a little bit more kind of defined by their roles and responsibilities rather than, oh, you're the woman, you know, I'm assuming that you're going to take on these roles, which is, you know, I feel almost cringe just saying that, really, in 2024.
But there still can be some of that, take the notes, get the coffee,
right,
because you're the woman in the room.
Well, you know, I gotta say though, since you brought up taking notes specifically, I actually take notes whether I'm asked to or not for a couple reasons. Okay. So number one, I like the way I take my notes. So I take them in a very organized way. I talk about the key points of what we talked about in the meeting. And then at the end, I actually put action items and I label which person got assigned which action item. And then I put a checkbox to make it look fancy, right?
Yeah.
And so I like doing that for several reasons. Number one, it just makes me look organized. Number two, I send it to everyone that was present at the meeting. Number three, in case someone later decides that, hey, back at that meeting I mentioned XYZ, I can refer back to the notes and say, hey, these are the notes I took. I sent these to you immediately to double check whether or not there was anything I missed and there was no response at that time. If this is a new request, I'm happy to take it on as a new request. However, just, you know, make note that according to my notes, it was not mentioned on that day and it was not brought up later. But I was taught that, you know, in order to kind of keep that record going, to take notes after every meeting, whether I was asked to or not.
Always a good habit.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of another point she brought up about not skipping your one-on-ones, you know, not being afraid to speak up.
Right.
You know, share that perspective. It can be easy to try to just be quiet.
Right. Let things slide. Career, I didn't really know how to handle things like that. I had been used to working for big companies where there are really policies and procedures put in place, very streamlined, regular training that was sent out to everybody quarterly. This was not one of those. This was more of a startup.
Yeah.
A little bit less structured. And so there was a little more room, a little more space for that type of behavior that is maybe not, there's not as much room in some of the large corporations. And that did start to happen. But when I now look back at that, there were little signs in the beginning where I could have and should have spoken up. You know, and it starts with, you know, bumping chairs. Like if someone's bumping their chair into my chair repeatedly, you know, that's a sign for me to say, hey, do you need me to give you room or something? Because I feel like you bumped in my chair several times and I don't feel comfortable with that. Or speaking up, you know, in a way that really states loudly that, hey, I'm not okay with this behavior. You know, I'm not here for that. Worth addressing is when young women And we've got a lot more young women who are graduating in engineering and software engineering and all these things. And they're getting into the workplace, having those lessons and teaching them that, hey, it is really important to speak up.
If we came from a family that there was like a really authoritarian father or something, this could make us in the habit of approaching as being like a little girlish.
Right.
To relate to authority
Actually,
figures.
she mentions the way I'm sitting right now. You can't see it on camera, but she talks about how women will sit with their foot tucked under their leg. And even that is a signal of kind of girlish behavior. So she goes into detail about ways that we signal little girl behavior.
Absolutely. And you don't even realize you're doing it because it's so subconscious. So it's great to read this book, look at all the call outs, and really reflect. Am I doing mindful? That?
She talks about nicknames. So this was kind of interesting. She mentioned that when a man usually states their name, and we kind of also did at the beginning of this podcast, right? When a man states their name, they state their first and last name. And there's no nicknames, usually. But when a woman says her name, almost immediately the other person may even shorten her name,
right,
or kind of give her this nickname. And that is also like a sign of dominance and overbearing.
Right.
I thought that was kind of interesting too.
That is. You said at the same time, you don't want to shortchange yourself.
Right.
You want to be proud of your whole name, build your brand.
That's true. She does talk about building your brand a lot.
Yeah.
And she asks, what is it that you want part of your brand? Do you want piercings and tattoos in your brand? Do you want, these things? And she does come up. One thing I did appreciate is that there was one thing she mentioned about hair. The shorter your hair is, it's inversely proportional to how mature in age do you look. The older you are, you cut your hair shorter. And I'm not willing to do that. I mean, I spent years growing my hair out. But she does mention a substitute that, hey, if you don't want to cut your hair, put your hair up so that it looks shorter. And so that was something that I really appreciated about her advice as well.
Thank you. I didn't remember that, but it makes sense. When you look at the women who have the corner office.
Yep.
There's certain grooming.
Yes. Grooming. She mentioned that specifically. She said, don't skimp out on the haircuts.
Yeah.
Don't skimp out on the grooming. Do not groom in public. And again, as soon as I think those things, I remember someone who maybe did all those things and they're a manager at a top company now. But I have to go back to the part where she says that person is the exception.
That's right.
Yeah.
And what another person can get away with, like you said, you might not be able to. And generally, we have to care about these things. And it can seem like common sense, but again, a lot of these things are subconscious. One thing she mentioned, even just grammar, I know I do it, is to remove words like sorry,
the filler.
And just. Like, I constantly say, just FYI, just.
Right.
And I still try, even though I know not to apologize so much, I still fall into doing it sometimes. I want to say apologies for the delay, and she's like, stop it.
Right.
Cut those words out. You do not hear men talking like that.
It's true. She does say to insert even like, and I'm guilty of that as well. I do use those terms, certainly. Filler words. I actually worked in customer service years ago when I first graduated from college, and one of the customer service representatives was extremely senior. She had been doing it for 20 plus years. And one thing she mentioned to me was, hey, Remy, I overheard you talking to a customer and you said sorry for putting you on hold. Why don't you replace that with thank you for holding?
I like that.
And that was when I was first in my, starting out my career. And I'm so glad I learned that so early, because I did kind of get more in this habit of dropping the sorries and going into thank you and appreciation.
The harassment that you mentioned.
Right.
I feel lucky I haven't experienced that, but it can always be uncomfortable if people flirt with you.
Right.
Or if you see coworkers flirting, right? It causes us to think less of them. Right? Like, you can't help be judgmental about those things. Or we see someone who's
men
married.
And women, by the way.
Absolutely.
I mean, if I remember, early in my career, I had watched a married man flirting with one of the single women in the group, and I just remember not thinking well of that person.
Right.
But I also remember watching that woman handle it very tactfully. I mean, she didn't completely ignore it, but she did give almost body gesture cues that, hey, this isn't something that I'm accepting. It was very subtle, but it was profound.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to see it. I mean, it's going to happen, and it doesn't make a good person a bad person. Is it consistent behavior? That's a different issue.
Right.
But it's something for us to be mindful of for ourselves. Like you said, how am I responding to someone who just happened to flirt with me today?
Correct.
Or how am I responding to others in my workplace? Am I expressing sexuality or showing? I was just entering the workforce at like 20 years old, and I used to wear like this mini skirt because I thought I was cute. And one of the manager's wives came in and was like, "What do you do here? Who are you?" But now that I'm older, I can laugh at myself. I honestly didn't know.
Right.
And no one was going to sit me down and say, "Hey, this isn't how we dress here."
I don't think it's a cut and dry rule. I don't think it's a matter of maybe don't wear this or don't wear that. There are some guidelines. I think that a person really has to know individually for them what works and what doesn't work. I think it took me a long time to really find the style for me that works in the workplace.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's tricky stuff.
Yeah.
No flirting.
Yeah.
No provocative clothes.
Right.
If you want the corner office. Anyway.
If you want the corner office. And that's another thing that you mentioned. That's a good point. It's about what the goals are. So I think really, as a life coach, task coach, time management coach, productivity, I really focus on that first. What are the goals? Like, what is it that, you're trying to accomplish? And then based on that, you can adjust, what you want to do in order to attain those goals and what you think your obstacles are for those goals.
Absolutely. I love that you're doing that.
Thank you.
You're a good person to help others learn new techniques to improve those parts of their lives.
Yeah, it's really about just kind of breaking it down. So understanding what it is you want. And I think that's hard even for me to really understand what is it that I'm really looking for very specifically. And then breaking down, what are some of the steps for me to get there? And what are some of the obstacles that are stopping me from going there? Because I think a lot of women I hear say often, the first thing they ask me is, how are you doing that?
Right.
And then the second thing they say is, I could never do it. Why? Why do you feel that way? What is it that's getting in your way, in your mind? Let's talk about it. Let's get into it.
We're always in our own way.
And so talk about your motherhood and
yeah, something came up recently.
So you've got 3 boys.
That's correct.
Okay.
I have 3 sons. They're between the ages of 20 and 30 now, so they're grown up. And I was talking to some other moms recently. We were talking about how we just want our kids to respect us. Like we really care about them saying, "Hey, I like you," and I like. Thank you for everything you did for me. And I thought, why is that so important to us? Because my self-esteem cannot depend on others, right? Yet I'm giving my son so much power to my self-esteem. I really need them to like me and say, "Hey, thank you for everything you did." And I thought, you know what? I don't remember ever thinking that way about my mom. I didn't ever go, "Oh, I should tell my mom what a great job she did." And so I had to look at it from that perspective, and it helped me get a little detachment. But the interesting thing was, I was talking to my sons about my career, and because I recently celebrated a 5-year work anniversary, which is kind of a big deal for me to be somewhere that long in this modern, especially tech world, right? It can be difficult to get a lot of time out of one place. And they said, "Oh yeah, we feel totally proud when we tell our friends where you work and what you do." And that shocked my mind because of all the things I've done for my sons, the thing that gives them the most pride when they talk to others is my career.
Right. The thing that you're doing for yourself. And happy mothers are really going to relay that positive upbringing to the children.
Absolutely. This is something that came up to me recently, is just learning the reverse psychology of it. So particularly in relationship to men, but you could apply it anywhere. The more we put the focus on ourselves,
right,
the more people value us because we're valuing ourselves. The more we abandon ourselves to focus on others, the more they value themselves.
Because they feel they're worthy of being valued, since you are dropping everything and valuing them.
I was at a company that was going through a lot of layoffs. And in the first round of layoffs, after the first round of layoffs, all of the people that were rock stars or high performers left. And so then they were left with the more mediocre people who just wanted to do their job and pay their bills and go home to their families. And I thought, wow, I'm the kind of person who stays even when all the signs say I should go.
Right.
And sometimes that makes a difference. I don't know when to quit.
Right.
That's another one of my self-sabotaging things in my career is when it's time to go, when the writing's on the wall, like it's okay to leave. But there is this part of me that's like too afraid to leave.
I do tend to get a little bit lost in what my objective is and what my goal is, and I start getting into the nitty gritty. So one of the things that I kind of learned a long time ago was, is this interaction I'm about to make, is this an interaction where I'm seeking an objective? I want to retrieve a phone number, I want to receive information. Is the purpose of this interaction building the relationship? Is this someone I'm trying to build a relationship with? Am I trying to, kind of increase this relationship, the quality of this relationship, be it a friendship, be it a, mother, father, niece, nephew, daughter, son, right? Or is this a chance for me to stand up for myself? And depending on which type of interaction it is, the way we approach that is very different. And I think that that's true in things like career and whatnot. It's like, what is my objective to be at this career? Is it that I'm just kind of trying to, make ends meet for the time being, and in the long run, I do want to, maybe apply for other jobs, which is something that career coaches often recommend, is even, the first day at a brand new job, apply to the next one, because you never know what's going to happen, essentially. Or is it that you want to get that corner office, and so, not putting all the eggs in one basket, trying for that, for whichever way you do, whether it's skill building, whether it's hiring a coach, whether it's, seeking more information. So I'm a PTO mom. So I'm part of the parent teacher association. And I, really kind of like have my objectives behind being here kind of lined up, right? So there's certain reasons. Number one, it could lead to other things, bigger things, right, that I'm about to announce. Number two, I'm there for my kids. I want my kids to have a school experience that is meaningful for them, that they have good memories, they make good memories. I want them to see that I'm involved in their education and the fun side of their school life, and I want them to associate. I want them to know that just because they're at school, I haven't just left them at school and, hasta la pasta. And also, I want to create a community, a level of community there. And I feel that I have the leadership skills to do those. So those are kind of my objectives. When something little happens or petty happens, in the past, I would have been so wound up in something like that. But when something like that happens now, I remember those objectives. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Is my purpose to please this one person whom I only met 2 years ago? Or are these my long-term objectives? And as soon as I put it in perspective like that, it changes the game for me.
Absolutely. Having a little detachment.
Right? Yeah. Detach with love.
Yeah. I can't say, you brought up another good point though of sometimes you have to job hop to really get ahead.
Right. Hardball for women, winning at the game of business.
Okay. Audible. Yeah. By the way, I absolutely love Audible.
Yeah.
I remember I was struggling to read books, and then I was at a company dinner, and everyone was like, hey, what books have you read lately? And this one woman like rattled off 3 books, and we all looked at her like, what? How do you have time for that? Because she had 3 kids, and they're all super busy at work, and she said Audible.
Well, and if you want to support the local library, Libby, Libby is the library version, and I love it because it's free. Obviously, it's supported by the library. I get to support my local library, and all you need is a library card. And that's it. Yeah. And they've got, I actually, right when you mentioned that book, I got the audio version and I got the ebook version. And so anytime I heard something that was worthy to me, I just went into the ebook version and I took some notes and popped it over. And so I felt like, I think it took me like 2 days to get through it. I call it being resourceful. I mean, really being able to, we live in a day and age right now where people are talking about AI, but there's so much more than AI that's available to us. There's dictation for writing papers. There's Libby and Audible to, have books. Tell me a little bit about your fitness routine and kind of what you're doing for that.
Yeah, right now I am working with a personal trainer because I do not have the motivation myself. Found a gym down the street that has group training option because I can't, as a single mom, I can't really afford the personal trainer, which is what, $100 an hour nowadays.
Oh, wow. So
I found this gym that has offers a group option.
Okay.
So I train with maybe 2-3 other people.
Nice. That's not a lot.
So it comes to about $35-$40 per session.
That's nice.
and it gets me through.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that 2 times a week. I've recently discovered scuba diving. I've been enjoying that.
Yeah, no, scuba diving is I like that because that's interesting and that's unique. I myself do indoor climbing, and I'm actually doing my first outdoor climb on Saturday. You know, having that kind of those unique hobby, you had mentioned this actually in our last conversation, it sets you apart a little bit, and it gives people something to remember you by.
Tying that back to the workplace, they want people who have more going on in their life besides just work. We should both probably take up golf. I think that would help us with our career.
My kids play golf.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, surprisingly.
Teach
And
them.
and I'm down for the outfits. Would that be exception to wear some of those cute outfits? Maybe not. Thank you so much, Amelia, for taking the time. I think this is an important topic to talk about. I think this book
Agreed.
is really important to talk about.
Take care of yourself first, and the rest will follow.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm Remy Kay. I'm a comedian and a life coach, certified life coach, and we will see you on our next episode. Thank you so much for joining us.